Welcome to Meet the Author, sponsored by Author Event Network, in partnership with Bremerton Public Access Television. I'm your host, Guy Morris. Author Event Network is a nonprofit association of local authors who sign books at local festivals, fairs, and events. Our guest today is Rita Wirkala. Hi, Rita. Nice to have you back.
Thank you.
Always fun to talk to you. Fun to have this time.
And always a pleasure for me to be here.
Oh, good. Well, I know you've got a new book out, so we're going to talk about that. We'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
But I want to always go back to and start with your inspiration to become an author. Now, any author knows it's not for the money.
We do know.
So help the audience figure out, what compels you to do all of this work without that.
Yeah. Well, it was never in my plans to be an author, to tell you the truth. When I was living in Argentina, I was a musician. Then I moved to Brazil. I became an artisan and a businesswoman. When I immigrated to this country, I started a new career. Mm-hmm. Which led me to be a teacher at the University of Washington for many years.
Okay.
But in 2005, my husband and I were invited to go to Ecuador to work as volunteer for an NGO, CARE International. Mm-hmm. It was a wonderful experience, but it was also kind of upsetting. I there witnessed some environmental devastation, I would say. It was the contamination of the rainforest by oil companies.
Oil companies, I was just going to say. Yeah.
Texaco, that is a story. So I saw their open oil pits, and I saw people becoming ill because of the water contaminated. I met a woman that had to abandon her ancestral land and come to the United States in a smuggling boat. It was a terrible experience. But then it was kind of like experience of eye-opening, for me. So I felt this urge need to tell the story. Mm-hmm. So that was the beginning of my first novel. Okay. Which is called Encounter. It was first published by Pearson in Madrid, and it got a prize in International Latino Book Award, and then translated into English and got another prize for Books into Movies Award. It was never a movie, but I got an award. Yeah. So that, it was it gave me the idea for the first time that I could truly become an author. Yeah. So I started from there.
Well, and as a musician, you already had the creative chops, the ability to create something from nothing, based on inspiration, and so that was it. And I certainly understand. I worked with an oil company, major oil company, international oil company for 13 years. I was responsible for, at part of that career, EPA compliance. And so I was one of the only advocates in the whole company that not only believed we had to do it because the law told us to, but because it was the right thing to do for our children and grandchildren in the world. Exactly. Now, of course, EPA only applies to what happens in the United States.
That's a problem.
So oil companies love international reserves because they don't have to comply with any of that baloney.
That is a tragedy.
And Ecuador, Exxon's famous in Ecuador for the amount of, but it's not just Ecuador, it's all over the world.
I know, yeah.
And so it was during a long story, but so I completely understand why that was a compelling inspiration.
Yes, people have to tell the truth,
Yeah. Now, okay, so after that initial inspiration, you've published lots of books and you've written several. Tell us about the genres you've written after that. After
that, I chose to do also another novel, which is not here. It's The Water of the Kalahari. It was inspired by a trip that I took with my husband to Botswana, and I saw, it was what they call a self-guide safari. So I met there some bushmen, displaced people, more or less the same story. after that, I wrote 2 memoirs. My life in Argentina, one from my early years in a little town in the Pampas, the other one when I was older. And then I wrote 2 young adult books. And I think that, my last one is not a novel.
Okay. So
It's a nonfiction.
tell us about your last one then. Consciousness from the brain to the ineffable sensation of being.
Exactly.
What an interesting title.
Yeah.
And as you know, I've been studying consciousness from the quantum perspective.
Oh, wow. Yeah, we'll get there.
So yeah. So tell us about your book. What inspired it?
Well, mainly it's about the different theories of consciousness. It's something that always interests me, always. But last year, well, I would say at the end of 2023, I was in a library. Well, for the start, I have a podcast in Spanish, which is called Dime de qué se trata. That means, tell me what it's about. And this podcast, what I do is to comment books that I have read, non-fiction books in English, and it's directly to those people who are interested. They want to know what it's about, but maybe they don't have time to read, or they don't like to read non-fiction, or they don't read English, whatever. So I was in the need of a new book. So I was in the library, and I found this book called Galileo's Error. Galileo's error. What error can Galileo may have done? So I opened the book, and for my surprise, the book was about the theory of consciousness. And I said, oh my gosh, this is what I want to read. I love the book. There were other things that I wanted to research or to say. So I said, well, I think that I had to write my own book. So that was the beginning. And you see, even for scientists and philosophers, this is a very enigmatic the subject, right?
Exactly.
Because the widespread notion is that consciousness emerged from the brain. But the question, the normal question, the obvious question is how something so material, so physical, so algorithmic, like a bunch of neurons, a brain, can give rise to something that is so ethereal, so non-algorithmic, so untangible, what I said, ineffable, right? Like your emotions, your thoughts,
imagination,
even your dreams, your sensations. This
out-of-body experiences, paranormal.
Yeah, you cannot measure that. Yeah. So there is a gap between brain and mind.
Exactly.
Yeah. So mainly that was the idea.
So you researched for the book. You wrote another book.
Yes.
What were the key things you learned, and where were the big surprises?
Well, I started learning about the whole notion of consciousness that is called dualistic version, like Descartes or even Plato or Galileo. These people, they consider that mind and body are 2 totally separate entities. Well, yes, they are, but they are not, in a sense. Where, for example, Descartes says, well, the body is here, and the soul, because they call the soul, belongs to God. So we don't research that. There are 2 different things. So that chapter I call the bird and the cage, because the relations, according to them, the relationship between mind and consciousness, or let's say brain and consciousness, is as much as a bird and a cage. They share the same space, but they don't communicate. And we know that it's impossible because, well, impossible, let's say, the neuroscience have told us that there is a correlation. We are not saying that it's a cause, but it's a correlation. Because if you have a brain injury, it's going to reflect in your mind, in your behavior. Yeah. Then I learned about the opposite position, which is the materialistic one. They started in the 19th century with the positivism, right? And these materialists, they go to some extremes of denying the existence of consciousness, or at least self-consciousness. For example, Francis Crick, the one that discovered the double helix of the DNA, well, he famously declared, "We are nothing but a pack of neurons." Wow. Then they deny your free will. And this is very unsettling for me. Right? There, there are other positions that in intermediate positions. So you have the compatibilists that say, yes, everything is determined by your brain and the connection of your neurons, but there is some place for free will. Yeah, and then there are new stories, there are new theories coming. Yeah, at the end of the book, I have my own. I offer my own.
Yeah. No, consciousness. You're right, and it is an extremely it's an enigma for science.
An enigma.
There are both physical components and non-physical components. They can't explain, for example, coma patients actually waking up and saying they could hear everything.
Oh yes.
They just couldn't respond. And so there's so much about consciousness that the current science can't explain.
Yeah, and it's not only an intellectual curiosity. It has a moral and ethical implications.
Yeah.
Because if you have somebody who's in coma and then you want, well, okay, it's a time to disconnect the person. Do we know if they are conscious?
Are they okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah. Do we know? Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Ethical questions and spiritual questions.
Exactly.
So the extra consciousness. So some people believe that consciousness, there's a universal consciousness that we're simply tapping into through a quantum entanglement, and that explains the spirit. That explains out of paranormal experiences, out of body experiences, remote sensing and viewing, all of these things of consciousness that we can't explain by simply saying it's neurons going on in a physical body. So very fascinating topic. So did you find the answer, the Odyssey, as you call it, what did you find that affected your life in particular?
Well, it did affect my life because, you see, in the last articles, for one thing, they talk a lot about the new ones are the new approaches now are mainly two. One is what you mentioned, quantum mechanics, introduced by Roger Penrose.
Exactly.
Mainly in relation to the behavior that is also so mysterious, right? The behavior of quantum, especially whatever is related to entanglement, for example.
So we're taking one thing we don't really understand and trying to use it to explain another thing we don't really understand.
Yes.
I always love these conversations.
Yeah, and the second theory that is more in fashion now, and it resonates more with me, is one that combines the quantum perspective with this idea that you mentioned before of consciousness being a fundamental force of the universe, paired with time and space, or maybe not a third one, maybe they're underneath everything. So this combination is something that I think that deserves to be, studied. Yeah.
But when I was researching this for my book, one of the things I felt was that it's going to be very difficult. It's always going to be a mystery because it requires, in order to do that, it requires us to actually understand quantum physics at a deeper level, which we don't, and to understand the dimensional elements of the universe, which we can only theorize about this point. So until we can get to that dimensional element and the quantum theory, connecting that to consciousness will remain a theory as opposed to a proven fact.
Yes, probably yes.
And so ultimately it gets down to, what do you believe?
It's not a matter of believing, because when you say believe, it kind of like, something that they told you from the beginning, your
but
environment.
That believe in the sense of, How do we decide as individuals about our own consciousness and what it means, knowing that nobody can really tell us for sure? They can only give us theories. How do we decide in ourselves, what do we believe about that?
Yes.
Because it has to be something that we can, some people can say, well, I'm going to believe the doctors that say it's physical. I'm going to believe the Nobel Prize winners that say it's quantum. I'm going to, but it becomes not something we can prove.
Exactly.
It ultimately becomes a theory or a form of belief.
Even if we never find an answer, the idea of studying and talking and reading about that, it gives you a wider horizon. It makes you feel maybe you were materialistic before, and then you say, these things are happening, with people at the end of their life, and they have some experience on maybe there is something there. So it kind of like change your life a little bit, I would say.
Yeah, it opens up the questions of life after death. What happens afterwards? What happens after the brain ceases to function? Does the consciousness doesn't? And that's where I think it gets truly fascinating and inspiring and thought-provoking and hopefully life-changing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So who do you think your target audience is, and why did you write the book to them?
Well, it is directly to people who have any interest in the problem mind, body, or in the soul and in the existence of the soul. Probably it's not a very wide readership that would be interested in that. I don't know. But that's not what we do when we write. We are not looking for who is going to buy my books. You write because you want to say something. Yeah. Right?
Well, and because we're curious about something.
Yes.
We're wanting to explore something ourselves, and articulating it is one of the best ways that we can do to understand it.
Exactly. Yeah, it was a challenge for me to write something that is a problematic, topic. Complicated, I would say.
Complicated, yes.
So I have to do it. I try to avoid the academic and tone, didactic tone. So I wrote the book in a form of a diary, where I can enter day by day or whatever, enter my learning. And my learning was through dialogues. Dialogues with historical figures or contemporary figures. I have a conversation.
Okay, interesting.
I invented a character.
I get it. No.
I invented a character that gives me a weird, unusual herb that I can make a tea, and it gives me my imagination to fly. So it's kind of a justification for me to have these conversations, which happens always in my garden, because in my garden I am surrounded by organic life, right? And it's also another question. Consciousness. Do animals have it? Do the vegetables have it? Anyway, so I have conversation with Plato, with Descartes, with Galileo, with Teilhard de Chardin, a panpsychist.
Yeah. The imagination of actually being able to have a conversation with all those people is exciting in itself. I would love to go back and talk to those people.
Yeah. Yes.
So I want to get to a couple other questions, though. You talk about interlocutors and other beings. Help us understand what you were meaning there, what you were writing about there.
Well, because in my book, I not only deal with the theories of human consciousness, but also I go beyond to the animal consciousness, or non-human animals, right? I was a little bit disturbed when I read Descartes' research, because he thought that animals were mere machines, and they didn't have any consciousness, any sensation. So he would go to the extreme of dissect alive animals to do his research. Yeah, of course we wouldn't do it anymore. Yeah. I mean, we know better now. We do know that animals have consciousness. Yeah. Maybe they don't have a self-consciousness or an autobiographical consciousness, but still they have sensation, right? But I did go beyond that, and I did some research on the vegetal realm. Trees and plants, do they have something there? Is something like a proto-consciousness, some sensations? The only thing that I did, without putting any my opinions about that, it was to cite the most recent research
Got it.
on this. Yeah.
It is a fascinating topic. I've seen research that indicates plants can respond, they can respond to music, but that could simply be vibrational issues. There are a lot of other physiological things that it could be explaining. Consciousness in animals, I think we've seen enough evidence of them acting kindly, caring, loving, the things beyond instinct and survival that deal with their relationship with us, their relationship with each other, that I think tells us that there's something there. You know, we can argue about whether there's a soul or a spirit and what terms, but those are just simply taxonomy terms that we have to define these elements of our existence.
Yeah, the ineffable.
Yeah. So tell us about, we only have time for maybe one more question, but I want to kind of have it be a good one. I know, do you have any new books coming out, and where is it that you want to take your journey as an author next?
I am not planning any new book.
Okay.
I am planning to update this one.
Okay.
Why? Because when I published this book last year, I sent, academia.edu, I sent a summary of my book. From that day on, I started to receive articles, not one but two maybe, every day. Every day. There is an explosion of interest in the subject.
Yeah.
I guess that is due to the rapid development of AI, right? So artificial intelligence, we say, are they thinking? Well, no, but but so many scientists and philosophers say they may be able to develop consciousness. I don't think so, but that's another story, what I think. But the articles
we'll talk about that offline. I know because I have a whole book series about that.
I read the book. I read your book about the Lost Ark, and I know what you think.
Well, and I go further into it to deal with, we deal with if the quantum is, if there's a quantum nature to that, can quantum computing, can an AI built on quantum computing actually become conscious? And there's a lot of debate on that. I speculate, I may be completely wrong, but it makes for a good story.
Yes.
Well, final question. You've been a member of AEN for a couple of years now, and so happy to always have you. But some of the Spanish books don't sell as well to some of the public. What's your experience with AEN been, and would you recommend it to others?
My experience has been wonderful, Guy.
Thank you.
I don't sell too many books, or as many books as other people who are writing other genres like romance or fantasy or crime. This is the one that people like the most. So my topics may be less interesting, but that is not a measure for me. That it doesn't matter the amount of books or the amount of money. Good. It really is a big satisfaction for me to have the direct contact with the readers. Yeah. Sometimes people buy my book and then they send me an email and tell me what story touch their soul or or resonate with them. So it's very much satisfying that way.
The relationship that we develop with readers.
Yes, this is it. Yeah. Absolutely. And also there is some friendship in the group, camaraderie that I really value. So yes, it was 100% positive.
Well, thank you so much for joining us again. I'm so excited about your new book. This one interests me particularly as well, But I've always loved the oil story. It resonates with me as well. I'd love to tell you about an experience I had in the boardroom with this topic.
Okay.
But it's always wonderful to see you. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching Meet the Author. Come and meet all of the AEN authors during the 2026 summer season that'll start in April and go through October and December, season both in Seattle and Portland. And in the meantime, keep on reading.